We can move on and talk about Everton, Pete. Now, we know some shareholder groups this week have called for 777 Partners takeover deal to come to an end. What's an update, please, on that? And actually, where are we expecting this to now go?
Well, like we've been saying on the pod, probably for the last few weeks and months, this takeover deal isn't going to happen. I just don't see it happening at all. It's become like a soap opera, this whole 7-7 Partners thing. And I can understand the frustration of the Club Shareholders Association, the way this whole thing's gone about. It's just dragged on. It's been more than 8 months since the initial deal was agreed between Farhad Mashiri and 7-7 Partners for the Miami-based firm to buy his 94% stake. But the Premier League's yet to give its approval to 7-7 Partners for the deal to happen. It's just way too long. We've talked about it before. There's been so many red flags, warning signs that 7-7 Partners probably weren't the right group to take control of Everton. There's been so many concerns raised at other clubs that 7-7 Partners are involved in. There's been protests, I think, at Hertha Berlin in Germany, in Standard Liège in Belgium. There's been unpaid wages for the players at Standard Liège as well. The airline that 7-7 Partners own when its administration last month as well. It's been a saga, and I can imagine the frustration that everybody involved with Everton, hoping that these new owners were going to come in with a new era, a new dawn at the club, but it just hasn't been. And as I said, they've got 200 million in unpaid loans out as well. 7-7 Partners just to top up the club this season. So basically, they've been paying for the club this season, even though they're not the owners. It's madness when you think about it, and it's crucial for Everton to sort this ownership problem out this summer, because they're going to have a difficult enough summer in the transfer market anyway, with potential PSR breaches for next season while we wait on their financial end of year accounts for June. So it's an untimely affair. I don't know. I feel if you're an Everton fan, it's a never-ending story of just drama around the club right now. And as I said, it's been a saga, and I think everybody connected with Everton is probably fed up with it. Like, I'm a bit fed up talking about it. It's just it's a bit boring now. It's just like I said months ago, this deal wouldn't happen, and it looks like it's going to come to fruition that this deal isn't going to happen, and Everton are going to need somebody else to bail them out and the potential new ownership.
Well, everything around the 777. I mean, I was reading up on it yesterday. I mean, the companies in Belgium, they've had assets that are seized. The Standard Liège players haven't been paid in April, and just the different things, that all the noises that surround 777 at the moment, it doesn't bode well, because you look at the four preconditions that the Premier League put in place for the sale: repaying 158 million loan owed to MSP Sports Capital, convert 200 million of 777's loans to Everton into equity, inject 60 million for day-to-day operational costs for the completion of the season. This was back 8 months ago. And fund about 100 million for the completion of the club's new stadium. And only money that has been put in has been for the day-to-day running of the running costs of the club, but as a loan. So there's been no investment, no takeover. They've given Everton Football Club the money, but as a loan, in expecting it to be repaid. But you listen to all those four conditions that the Premier League put in place, and then you look that the Standard Liège players haven't been paid, and all the assets at 777 in certain businesses have been frozen. I mean, it just stinks. It doesn't look like Pete said months ago. It doesn't look like it's going to happen.
Paul, what do you think this will mean for the impact on the summer transfer window? How will Sean Dyche be feeling and thinking ahead of the window? Of course, I'm sure they were planning some potential moves. Do you think they'll have to change, actually, given this whole scenario that's going on?
Well, I think he's probably working to about 6 different budgets, in all honesty. I mean, the way you're looking, the unpredictability and the uncertainty around Everton and Forest as well. I mean, it's quite black and white at times. When you're at the top of the Championship or the bottom of the Premier League, you work to 2 budgets. You work to a Premier League budget and a Championship budget. Sean Dyche is working to a Premier League budget, a Championship budget, a budget if we lose Onana, Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Jordan Pickford, a budget if we don't lose any players and are allowed to keep our players, but we can't sign anybody because we've got financial restrictions on the contracts we've already got. I mean, he must be sat there shaking his head like we do every week, and he must be sat at home. And honestly, with a little bit of irony, he might probably just chuckles to himself and just goes, what next? He literally doesn't know what's happening day to day.
He can't plan. That's the big thing, because he just doesn't know what's going on, what's around the corner for Everton. If this takeover is not done, Everton's hands are pretty much tied on what they can do. As I said, maybe it's been Farhad Mashiri's master plan to get all the running costs of the club paid by somebody else this whole season, and then they don't end up taking over either. So he gets maybe paid by a potential new owner, and then 7-7 partners are out 200 million and just keeping the club afloat this season. But yeah, it's been a mess, and you got to feel for Sean Dyche because he's done what he's needed to do on the pitch. He's kept Everton up, and I think that has been crucial. If Everton had went down this season with everything else that's going on, it could have been a real disaster for the club. But he's done his piece. He's kept them up, and I think that will obviously help potential new owners maybe to come to the table and maybe look to strike a deal to buy the club.
And Pete, going forwards then, to ensure this doesn't happen to a club like Everton going through this process, what measures need to be put in place to ensure that we don't have a takeover again? It just goes on and on. And actually, then every week we have to talk about it on this podcast.
Yeah, well, the Premier League should have made a decision before now. If the proof of funds wasn't there, you move on and say that 7-7 partners can't be allowed to buy Everton Football Club. Supposedly they did pass the fit and propers test, which you need to do as a potential takeover, which is staggering really. So they've passed that test. But again, as like Paul mentioned about it, you need proof of funds of equity as well and everything else. And obviously that's not been there. They've asked for extensions on the repayment of the loans as well. So obviously the money's not there, and the warning signs and the red flags were there with all the other issues going on with other businesses that they're involved in. So yeah, the Premier League, I think, maybe just to give Everton false hope that this deal could go through. They should have made a decision earlier. For a takeover, a potential takeover, to drag on for 8 months just doesn't do anybody any good and doesn't make the Premier League look good. And as I said, it's giving false hope to Everton and again leaves them in a perilous position now, potentially looking for new owners going into the summer.
Pete, sorry, Lewis, the fit and proper persons test, does that have any kind of lifespan on it? Obviously, because what's happened in the last 8 months, 777 situation has changed, and it's changed for the worst. I mean, you're reading about it. 777 partners and Wando were last week accused of a fraudulent scheme by a lender in New York. Last week, 777 eventually sent a delayed payment of 16 million to Everton for a day-to-day costs, which take the total it's lent to the club to more than 200 million. While, as you say, the airline that it owns entered voluntary administration. So will that fit and proper persons test that they sat 8 months ago, does that still sit now, or do you look at it and go, hang on a minute, we have to redo that?
It probably sits right now because they've passed it initially, but with all these other concerns and other businesses that are involved in, you got to think, how did they pass that test in the first place? So, as I said, if you passed that and they had proof of funds, this deal would have happened. It would have been done by now, and they would be in control of Everton. So maybe it could be a blessing in disguise that the deal hasn't happened when you see all these other issues that's going on in other businesses that 7-7 partners are involved in. So I think for Everton, maybe they could look at it as a bit of a lucky escape, because I think the situation could have got a lot worse. But again, there's been other issues over the years with Premier League's fit and proper persons test at other clubs as well, and we've seen clubs really struggle financially as well. So the Premier League need to get their house in order, maybe change some of the regulations that you need for a potential takeover of a club, because there's a few deals that have gone through, and obviously we've seen a few years later that the club find themselves in all sorts of financial messes. So yeah, I think definitely those regulations need to be updated and improved.
And Paul, to kind of wrap up this segment particularly, with Forest's appeal being rejected, what bearing will that have now on Everton going through this process? And actually, do you think, given that they are going to stay up, they're not in danger of relegation, they actually might not necessarily be too bothered about the outcome?
Well, like you say, they're up, they're safe. Give them more points back, they'll only go further up the table. But given that you give them the points back that they've actually been taken off them, they're having the best Premier League season in a long time. The players and the manager will just be absolutely delighted that they've managed to stay up, as will the owners and the potential takeover of the club. Everyone will be delighted that they've managed to stay up. In all honesty, without being crude and blunt, they probably won't care whether they get any points back or not in this situation. You know, Forest, obviously they've had their appeal rebuffed, but to Everton, it doesn't matter. If they were starting next season with negative equity, then it'd be a big issue to get the points back. But as they sit at the moment, I don't think they'll be too fussed, to be all honest.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.